Thank you all for being here with us today. We particularly welcome survivors and their families joining us, and a welcome to all those who just walked here as part of the Israeli-American Council's 6 Million Steps project. If you are so able, please rise for the national anthems. Sit down. We will now have the presentation of the wreaths. Good afternoon. We are gathered once more at the monument to the 6 million Jewish martyrs, as we have for the past 58 years, to commemorate and honor the memory of the 6 million Jews who were annihilated by the Nazis and their sympathizers during the Second World War. Today's ceremony is particularly poignant as we watch in real time the horror and atrocities being committed in Ukraine in real time. And they are led by the tyrant as horrendous as Hitler and his followers. Watching the brutality being perpetrated on the people of Ukraine today brings back the horrors which are reminiscent of behavior towards the Jews of Europe. Beginning in 1939, European Jews were forced into ghettos in Poland, Romania, Lithuania, and the Soviet Union. There were over 1,000 ghettos established between 1939 and 1945. Jews were forced out of their homes, giving up their belongings, and made to live in squalor with lack of food, lack of medical attention, lack of dignity, and constant fear of what the future would bring. Life for the Jews living in ghettos was tenuous at best. Despite the difficulties of living under these conditions, welfare institutions became major factors affecting the quality of life of ghetto residents. In larger ghettos, Jewish councils maintained some education for children and adults, which included lectures, musical performances, book reviews, and celebrations of Jewish religious activities. In the Vilna ghetto alone, 1,400 pupils were enrolled in schools of various types. Classes were offered in various trades, supported by organizations such as Oneg Shabbos, the Jewish National Committee, ZOB, a Jewish resistance organization, the Jewish Labor Bund, and the Polish Underground. Soup kitchens were established to help feed the hungry, and some ghettos were even able to run kosher kitchens for the Orthodox population, providing for ritual slaughter in defiance of Nazi authorities. Minyanim, prayer forums, met secretly in private homes. In some Polish ghettos, ORT supported vocational training workshops. All these efforts provided a brief escape from the realities of ghetto life. Theatrical productions, concerts, painting classes, and sports gave ghetto residents a small reprieve from the reality of hunger and fear each person lived with. I was amazed to learn that the book review lecture for War and Peace was the best attended program in the Warsaw Ghetto. Political and ideological organizations worked together to assist those in the ghettos in creating underground organizations. In the Warsaw Ghetto, Emanuel Ringelblum led the Oneg Shabbos project, with leaders of other groups active in ghetto life, archiving as much as possible by archiving as much as possible by burying copies of publications and other materials in metal milk containers and metal boxes to preserve the history of life during this period of extreme turmoil. Many of the containers have been dug up, and more are still being located to this day, giving us a window into life in the ghettos. When it became apparent that the Nazis planned to liquidate the ghettos of all of its inhabitants, the leaders of the Warsaw Ghetto met to vote on whether the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto should revolt against the Nazi machine. Minutes of these meetings have been found in one of the rescued metal containers, which show that several votes were taken, with each ending in a tie. Upon researching further, I became aware that one of my uncles, Henoch Rus, changed his vote, and the Warsaw Ghetto uprising came to be. We're going to light our menorah with 6 candles, each one representing the 1 million Jews that were killed during the war. This past winter, I think you will all recall that Philadelphia had a major flood of the Schuylkill River, and our menorah was damaged, and it seemed that no one could repair it. But due to the hard work of our manager for these programs, Beth Raisin, she was able to find Rich Cohen, who worked on the menorah with his dad, and they were able to repair it and make it look even more beautiful than it did today. And I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of Rich, who remembered working on this menorah with his father back in 1988. And so we're delighted that he was able to fix it and make it happen for us again. At this point, I will call the candle lighters to come up. Sophie? I'm sorry, I didn't know where you were. I apologize.
Philadelphia was the first city in the United States to memorialize the Jewish victims of Hitler's master plan. The bronze sculpture behind me, known as the Monument to 6 Million Jewish Martyrs of the Holocaust, was designed by the Jewish sculptor and painter Nathan Rappaport, who lived in Warsaw at the time of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and was presented to the city of Philadelphia in 1964 by the Association of Jewish Holocaust Survivors of Philadelphia.
We light 6 memorial candles in memory of 6 million Jewish souls killed during the Holocaust, each with a unique and precious soul who took struggles and hopes, worked, studied, took walks, sang, laughed, the ordinary things of life. They celebrated births and weddings, mourned at funerals, each as an individual or a part of the Jewish people. Each one suffered, whether they died of hunger, cold, overworked, or murdered. Each an individual annihilated just because they were Jews.
First candle is lit in memory of the infants, children, and teenagers who were cut down like young trees before their time, and in memory of the unborn children who never had a chance to be. Gedenkt, Zachor, remember.
We light the second candle in memory of all the mothers who died with their children in their arms. Gedenk, Zachor, remember.
Is lit in memory of all the fathers who were cruelly separated from their families, who were starved, who were worked to death. Gedenk, Zachor, remember.
We light the fourth candle in memory of all the valiant men, women, and children herded into the ghettos who set up schools, synagogues, hospitals, and soup kitchens, orphanages and burial societies, youth groups, and theaters, creating order amid chaos, choosing life amidst death. Zachor, remember.
The fifth candle is lit in memory of those who formed partisan groups after escaping transports, ghettos, and camps to strike back at the cold-blooded enemy, and to the ghetto fighters who dared to defy the Nazi war machine, while strong and armed nations stood by, uncaring and unaiding. Gedenk, Zachor, remember.
The sixth candle is lit in memory of the parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, and friends who believed so deeply in the goodness of man and whose blood cried out to us. Gedenk, Zachor, remember.
If you are able, please rise. El male rachamim shochen bamromim dayan almanot ve'avi tomim al na techeshev ותתאפק לדם ישראל שנספח כמים ותן מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים טהורים וגיבורים כי זוהר המרקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמות אחינו ואחיותינו 6 מיליון מישראל אנשים ונשים ילדים וילדות שנהרגו ושנשחטו ושנשרפו ושגבו ברעב ונקברו חיים ועוד מיתות משונות על ידי הנאצים הארורים ועוזריהם יימח שמם באושוויץ, טרבלנקיה, מיידנק, מילטהאוסן ובשאר מחנות השמדה באירופה, ומסרו נפשם על קידוש השם, בעבור שאנו מתייחדים עם זכרם ומתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם. בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם, לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויתרור בתרור החיים את נשמותיהם. ארץ אל תכסי דמם, ואל יהי מקום לזעקתם, בזכותם נדחי ישראל ישבו לאחוזתם, והקדושים לזיכרון תמיד. נגד אדוני צדקתם יבואו שלום, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימים, ונאמר Amen. You may be seated and find the words on page 7 to Ani Ma'amin. Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin. Be'emunah shlema beviat HaMashiach, ve'af al pi sheyitmamea im kol ze ani ma'amin, im kol ze achake lo בכל יום שיבוא.
Each year, since 1975, the Mordechai Analevich Creative Arts Competition encourages Philadelphia area middle school and high school students to learn about and reflect upon the history of the Holocaust through creative expression and response. We continue to teach the lessons of the Holocaust so that young people of all backgrounds recognize the importance of their voices and learn not to remain silent when confronted by the racism, prejudice, and genocide that still plague our world. Last year, a poem by Kaylee Atkins, an 8th grade student at Spring Lake Middle School, won first prize among all the 7th and 8th grade poetry entries. I would like to invite Elliot Gantry-Sharp and Stefan Achalt, 4th generation children from the Children's Folk Shul, to read Kaylee's award-winning poem from the 2021 Analevich competition entitled Behind the Walls.
In our darkest hours, the world feared our pain. They pretended not to see us because they didn't want to be us, so they built walls to hide from their shame. Behind the walls they built, we starved. We lived on food that kept us weak, the taste so bad that many died because they couldn't eat, and the world watched in silence.
Behind the walls they built, we drowned, never knowing who would meet his death. Shoved into barrels and tubs of water,
We watched as friends took their last breath, and the world watched in silence.
Behind the walls they built, we burned, locked in rooms of gas and flames. We walked so blindly into their traps, stripped of life in a world of pain, and the world watched in silence.
Behind the walls they built, we hoped that soon we would be saved. It was hope that kept us going, hope that kept the fear at bay. We hoped for the help that came too late.
Wow. I would like to acknowledge Pastor Todd Stavrakos of Gladwin Presbyterian Church, who spoke during today's lighting of memorial candles. If you would please stand. Pastor Stavrakos is also a member of the Collegium of the Presbytery of Philadelphia, which he's also representing here today, and a member also of the Religious Leaders Council of Greater Philadelphia. Thank you, Pastor Stavrakos, for your presence and participation today and the powerful message it sends. Today, we remember the 6 million Jewish martyrs and honor the survivors in our community. It's hard to find words to adequately explain the unique significance and meaning that this annual memorial ceremony has had over the years. It's equally hard to find words to adequately explain why it's so meaningful again to be able to hold this ceremony within sight and touch of the very special monument to the 6 million Jewish martyrs. And it is because of this unique significance and meaning that we must surely understand that our solemn obligation extends beyond this one single day. We also share a sacred trust, a sacred bond, which calls for us to do more. We must increase our efforts in Holocaust education and explore new and imaginative ways to ensure that today's and future generations understand the true history of the Holocaust, the lessons of the Holocaust, the how and the why it happened. And in today's times, it could not be clearer that we must do all that we can to ensure that never again really does mean never again. Anti-Semitic actions, anti-Semitic speech, Jew hatred of any kind must be challenged immediately and forcefully. They cannot be ignored and they cannot be allowed to fester. As we know, but it bears repeating, the horrors of the Holocaust were conceived and carried out by a duly constituted government authority, along with Nazi sympathizers. Nazi anti-Semitism was a movement, an ideology specifically directed against the Jews. The Nuremberg laws and the final solution were directed against the Jews. Government, whose first and highest responsibility is the safeguarding of its citizens, instead turned its full might to murder a selected segment of those very citizens. Present here with us today are United States Congressman Dwight Evans and Philadelphia City Councilman Alan Dom, who will be presenting a resolution from the City Council of Philadelphia. Now think about this. Representatives of duly constituted government authority, but in contrast to the Holocaust, they are here with us today, joining with us, not attacking us on this very special occasion. I would ask Congressman Evans and Councilman Dom to please stand. We should understand that their presence today is not merely symbolic. To the contrary, their presence and the City Council resolution which Councilman Dom brings sends a strong and powerful message that in this country, duly constituted government joins with us in acknowledging, not denying, in remembering, in paying tribute to the 6 million Jewish martyrs, in honoring them, and ensuring that they will never be forgotten, and in pledging never again. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce Philadelphia City Councilman Alan Dom.
Do it together. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say a few words with Congressman Evans. Well, I'm honored that he's here with me today. By the way, he's an amazing elected official. Every one of us needs to be supporting him, not to give a political ad, but he's a great friend of mine and a great ally. But I will say this, when I'm sitting here and every time I come to these events, and I'm sure that everyone who has connection to the Holocaust feels this way. You remember your loved ones who were lost in the Holocaust. You know, my grandfather was one of 12. He came here in 1916, but his 11 siblings, spouses, his parents, and children were all killed in concentration camps. And I say to myself, wow, how lucky I am. And then I'm watching what's going on in Ukraine, and I feel like it's similar to what occurred during World War II. And we cannot be silent, and we need to help Ukraine as much as we possibly can. So having said that, I'm going to let Congressman Evans say a few words, and I'm going to give a few words of the citation.
I too want to join my statements with the councilman and the importance to show a unified effort where America started here in Philadelphia, a unified effort that never again should this ever occur. So I join with the councilman and all my colleagues on this very important. Thank you.
The Council of the City of Philadelphia is pleased and proud to recognize April 24th through May 1st, 2022 as the annual remembrance of the 6 million Jewish martyrs who perished during the Holocaust, and hereby acknowledge the atrocities endured by the entire Jewish community and recognize its impact on all subsequent generations. Whereas 70 years ago, 6 million Jews were murdered in the Nazi Holocaust as part of a systemic program of genocide, while millions of other people also suffered as victims of Nazism. And
whereas this year we commemorate the 77th anniversary of the end of World War II, when American forces liberated one of the largest concentration camps on April 11, 1945. Whereas the concentration camp and the importance of to send a message that although German leaders had attempted to empty the camp of survivors and cover up the atrocity, it is important that we stand here and send a message, never again.
And whereas the theme this year is behind and beyond the ghetto walls, the deprivation of ghetto life and the constant fear of Nazi terror made resistance difficult and dangerous, but not impossible. In addition to armed resistance, Jews engaged in various forms of unarmed defiance. These included organized attempts at escaping from the ghettos into nearby forests, non-compliance with Nazi demands on the part of Jewish community leaders, illegal smuggling of food into the ghettos, and virtual resistance. And I just want to mention, it's amazing about your uncle. That's an amazing story. And that story should be told at every school in our city.
Whereas spiritual resistance referred to the intent by individuals to maintain their humanity, personal integrity, dignity, and a sense of civilization in the face of Nazis' attempts to dehumanize and degrade. Most generally, spiritual resistance may never to refuse to have one's spirit broken, and the cultural and educational advice maintain and continue documentation. Whereas the city of Philadelphia remains committed to the principle of equal justice for all people, stand internally virgin, and that bigotry provides a way that we will never accept it.
And therefore, by virtue of this citation, the Council of the City of Philadelphia, myself, Councilmember Alan Dom, and Congressman Dwight Evans do hereby recognize the week of April 24th to May 1st as the annual remembrance of the 6 million Jewish martyrs. We further recognize the horror of the Holocaust and extend to the Memorial Committee the respect and admiration of this legislative body in the City of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Even in the ghetto, Jews did not passively despair. Amid death and destruction, life in the ghetto never ceased. The Warsaw Ghetto had 5 theaters. There was a symphony orchestra, chamber music groups, choirs, and concerts. Perhaps this is the highest form of resistance. In the Vilna Ghetto in 1943, there was even a music contest won by an 11-year-old boy. The children sang. Even amidst the sickness and filth, youth led the way. This next song, the youth hymn, extols the young people for their strength and persistence. Our song is full of sorrow, yet our marching step is strong. Though the foe blots out tomorrow, young folks answer with a song. The lyrics are by partisan poet Shmerky Katraginsky, set to music by Basha Rubin. This song became the voice of youth in the ghetto.
Good afternoon. I am Gail Norrie, co-chair of the board of the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia. On behalf of myself and my co-chair, David Edelman, it is an honor to be here today to observe Yom HaShoah together as a community. This is a sacred time to commemorate the 6 million Jews killed during the Holocaust, to honor the survivors, and to pay tribute to the many who demonstrated courage and resilience in the face of extreme horror. Every year on this day, as with many of you, my thoughts are with those who survived and those that were lost. Just a few weeks ago, we lost a legend, Girda Weissman Klein, a 97-year-old Holocaust survivor. When she was only 15 years old, she was ripped apart from her beloved family and sent to a concentration camp and later on a death march. In 1945, she was liberated by the United States Army in a factory that was supposed to have been burned down. When Kurt Klein, an American soldier, opened the door for her to exit the factory, she said her humanity was restored. She later married that soldier, and together they moved to Buffalo, New York to begin a new life. Girda became a writer for the Buffalo News and raised their 3 children. Girda was a remarkable woman who told her story eloquently. I had the privilege of hearing her speak on numerous occasions and learned so much from her words and by her example. She won an Oscar for her documentary, One Survivor Remembers. In her acceptance speech, she said, "I have been in a place for 6 incredible years where winning meant a crust of bread and to live another day. Since the blessed day of my liberation, I ask the question, why am I here? I am no better. In my mind's eye, I see those years and days and those who never lived to see the magic of a boring evening at home. On their behalf, I wish to thank you for honoring their memory, and you cannot do it any better than when you return to your homes tonight to realize that each of you who know the joy of freedom are winners." Girda taught me to never take for granted our family, our friends, and our community, or even those boring evenings at home. As Jews, one of our most sacred responsibilities is teaching each generation about our past, about human cruelty and the fortitude of human endurance. We must continue to ensure that the stories of our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents are told so that those lessons can continue to be learned. The past 2 years have been tremendously challenging. As a society, we have lived through a devastating pandemic, racial tensions, and civil unrest. We continue to see anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist hostility escalate with all types of bigotry and xenophobia on the rise worldwide. In the past month, there were 4 separate attacks in Israel. This terrorism resulted in the death of 14 victims in just over 2 weeks, alongside numerous wounded. And it seems like every day Russia's war in Ukraine results in unbearable destruction and human suffering. Just last month, I traveled to the border of the Polish-Ukraine border and saw this devastation with my own eyes. I met refugees fleeing Ukraine, including many Holocaust survivors. One couple, Alexander and Ella, had to leave their home in Ludansk because their 97-year-old mother could not get to a shelter in time. She had fled the Nazis in Berdichev in 1941 and was now fleeing the Russians. She never thought she would have to do this again, and the bloodshed and falling bombs were extremely traumatic for her. Our Jewish communities must continue to stand strong against bigotry and racism in all of their forms in order to ensure the tragedy of the Holocaust is never repeated. If you look behind me, you can see these words inscribed on the monument. Now and forever enshrined in memory are the 6 million Jewish martyrs who perished in concentration camps, ghettos, and gas chambers. In their deepest agony, they clung to the image of humanity, and their acts of resistance in the forests and ghettos redeemed the honor of man. Their suffering and heroism are forever branded upon our conscience and should be remembered from generation to generation. Let us all never forget. Thank you.
We traditionally end this ceremony with the Mourner's Kaddish, followed by Zugna Keinmal, the Partisans' Hymn. In the Vilna Ghetto, and in labor camps in Estonia, 21-year-old poet Hirsch Glick wrote about resistance in his lyrics to the famed Zugnit Keinmal, which means never say. Glick's words were set to the music of a pre-war Soviet song written by the Pakras brothers, Dmitry and Daniel. The title derives from the first few words of the song. Zugnit Keinmal became known as the Song of the Partisans. It was adopted as the anthem of Vilna's United Partisan Organization, to which Glick belonged. Excuse me. Glick died in a concentration camp in Estonia in 1944. Today, this song is sung worldwide at memorials for the martyred Jews of the Holocaust, and here in Philadelphia, it serves as the traditional closing of this annual ceremony. Please rise for the Mourner's Kaddish, the commemoration prayer for the dead, followed by Zugnit Keinmal, which we will sing in the original Yiddish. Thank you.
The Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, recognizes the gap, the rift between the world, between what the world can be and what it is. Its words mourn that difference, that remaining holiness that has not made it through. V'yamlich malchutei will pray, we yearn for divinity to burst through the cracks of the heavens into our world. We know it is our duty to reveal that divinity in this world, to let it in. With the Kaddish Yatom, we mourn a time when the world was closed off to holiness. Join me on page 8. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv ve'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam olalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen.
Unser Blut, strotzen weg durch
We're grateful for you for coming here today and spending the afternoon with us for this very important memorial service. And we wish you all good health and happiness and peace in the world.